You're not independent anymore. Mom, we need your room for the baby. That's what my younger son, Ryan, said. With his arms crossed, standing over me like a lawyer closing a deal. And we've been covering your medical bills, Dennis added, sliding a folder of invoices across the kitchen table. It's only fair that you help out. Sell the apartment. Move into a proper facility. It's safer. And honestly, Sharon's pregnancy isn't easy. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took a long sip of chamomile tea, smiled politely, and said nothing. They thought they were being strategic. They thought I was too old, too tired, too fragile to fight back. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. My name is Louise Carter. I'm 63 years old. Widow, retired school nurse. North Carolina born and raised. 8 months ago, I had a minor stroke. I recovered quickly, but my sons insisted I move in with Dennis. My eldest said it was for my safety, said I needed help. I knew better. I saw the pity in their eyes, heard the subtle remarks. Mom forgets things. She shouldn't be driving anymore. We'll take care of it. So I played along. Let them think I was weak. Let them think they were in control. But the house they're living in, still under my name. The savings account they're whispering about, untouched, protected. The woman they thought was fading. She's wide awake. Before we go further, if you've ever felt underestimated by your own family, if you've watched your children turn into strangers, subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment if you've ever seen greed disguised as love. What happened next will stay with me forever. Let me take you back. They had drawn first blood. They just didn't know they'd started a war. I wasn't always this calm. I wasn't always this strategic either. But life has a way of teaching you who you are, especially when you're forced to start over in a house that used to feel like home, but now feels more like a trap. Let me take you back. I was born and raised in a small town just outside Raleigh, North Carolina. Back then, people left their doors unlocked and brought casseroles when someone got sick. I met Stan Carter my sophomore year at UNC Chapel Hill. He was majoring in mechanical engineering. I was studying nursing. He used to say I had the steadiest hands he'd ever seen. He was the quiet kind. Reliable. Loyal. Thought 2 steps ahead of everyone, but never needed to prove it. We got married young. Bought this house when I was pregnant with our first son. Stan poured every spare dollar into fixing it up new floors. A deck out back. That garden Sharon never even touches now. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We raised Dennis and Ryan here. Made a life. Laughed and cried and grew old together. Then cancer came, like a thief in the night. Stan was gone within 18 months. By the time he passed, we'd already prepared. Everything wills. Insurance. Accounts. He made sure I'd never have to rely on anyone financially. You won't owe anyone a damn thing, he told me, holding my hand in the hospice bed. Not even the boys. I didn't understand why he said that at the time, but I do now. After Stan died, I stayed in the house for a few years, but it got too quiet, too full of ghosts. So I moved to a modest condo in Durham. 3rd floor. But clean and peaceful. I volunteered at the local clinic, made friends, lived on my own terms. That was until the stroke. It wasn't major, just enough to slow me down for a couple weeks. But Dennis and Sharon were at my door before I even got home from the hospital. Concern written all over their faces. Mom, you can't be alone right now. Come stay with us. Just until you're stronger. I should have known better. But grief fogs judgment. So does hope. So I moved back into the very house Stan and I had built, from the ground up. Only now, it was Sharon's curtains in the living room. Sharon's color-coded labels in the pantry. My things tucked away in storage to make space. I didn't say anything. Not when my name disappeared from the mailbox. Not when they disconnected the landline I'd used for 20 years. Not even when my car keys went missing for safety reasons. I let it all happen. Quietly. Observing. My firstborn has always had a need for control. He gets it from his father, I suppose, but without the warmth. He's calculated. Precise. He thinks love is expressed through solutions and spreadsheets. He works in systems engineering and talks like a walking manual, always, right? Always composed. Ryan, on the other hand, was the baby, creative, friendly, and constantly drowning in debt. Failed businesses, maxed out credit cards, late fees piling up like unpaid dreams. He never stayed in one job for long, always chasing the next big idea. They were never close growing up. But now, it's like my presence somehow turned them into allies. Partners in a shared objective, managing me. At first, it was small things. Suggesting I shouldn't drive. Offering to look over my finances. Hinting at the cost of my medications, even though my insurance covered nearly everything. Then came the guilt trips. Sharon saying she felt crowded. Ryan mentioning how tight things were financially. Dennis casually bringing up the idea of selling my Durham condo to simplify my life. They wrapped it all in smiles. Wrapped it so well that even I started to wonder if maybe I was being paranoid. Until that night. It was a Thursday. Around midnight. I had trouble sleeping, so I went down to make tea. Chamomile? Same as always. I was about to head back to bed when I heard their voices, Dennis and Ryan, in the living room. Their backs were to me. They didn't know I was there. I checked the deed. Ryan said, "The house is still under her name." Dennis swore under his breath. "I thought Dad transferred it to you before he died." "Nope. She's still the owner. But if she's living here long enough, we might have a shot at adverse possession. She's not going to live forever," Dennis muttered. "We just need to get her into a facility and keep the place in the family." My hands trembled around the tea mug. Ryan laughed. Sharon already found a nice assisted living place in Cary. Clean? Private. She'll think it's a vacation. "What about the condo?" Dennis asked. "She's got savings. Between that and the apartment sale, we could clear all the debt and get this house free and clear," Dennis added. "It's the least she could do after everything we've done." I didn't say a word. I stood there. Quietly remove her. Sell what's valuable. Store the rest. That was when everything clicked. The forced concern, the endless safety suggestions, Sharon's smile that never reached her eyes, Dennis's constant checking of my pillbox, Ryan's sudden visits to check in. They weren't caring for me. They were staging an acquisition. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. My tea grew cold in my hands. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, but not like grief. No. This was sharper, cleaner, a surgical cut rather than a blunt wound. And in that silence, I remembered something Stan once told me while reviewing our estate documents. "Lou, if they ever treat you like a burden, remind them whose name is on the damn deed." I smiled. And just like that, I started planning. The next morning, I was up before the sun. There's something about betrayal that sharpens the senses. I moved quietly through the house, aware of every creak in the floorboards, every shift in the shadows. Dennis was still asleep. Sharon, too. The hallway was dim, but I didn't need light. I knew this house like the back of my hand. My first stop was the kitchen. In the corner by the fridge was the small oak desk where I kept my personal papers. A few months earlier, I'd moved them there for convenience. Really, I just wanted them nearby in case something ever went wrong. I opened the drawer slowly. Everything was right where I'd left it. My insurance statements, investment account printouts, And most importantly, the original deed to the house. Dated 1991. My name, Louise E. Carter. Sole owner. No joint holders. No liens? No transfers. I placed it in a manila envelope along with my bank statements, a copy of Stan's will, and the contact card of a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I tucked the envelope into my handbag. That morning, I told Sharon I was going out for a walk. She barely looked up from her phone. "I'll keep your tea warm," she mumbled. I doubt she even noticed I was gone for 3 hours. My first stop was the Wells Fargo branch downtown. I hadn't touched the safety deposit box in over 4 years, but I still paid the fee annually. Inside were original legal documents, a second set of keys to the Durham condo, and a sealed envelope labeled "In case of emergency, Stan." I stared at that envelope for a long time. I didn't open it. Not yet. Then I headed to the library. I spent most of the afternoon on a public computer, logged into my investment accounts, checked my 401k, looked into assisted living facilities, not for myself, but for reference. If I was going to fight back, I needed to understand the image they were crafting for me, the frail, confused mother who needed proper care. I bookmarked pages, took notes, and saved screenshots to a USB drive. Evidence of my lucidity, my planning, my independence. Before heading home, I made one last stop, a small law firm across from the county courthouse. The receptionist looked surprised when I asked for Sylvia Westfield. "She's semi-retired now. Only takes select clients. Tell her Louise Carter's here," I said. "From nursing school. Class of '82. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in Sylvia's office. Sylvia had once been a firecracker of a woman's sharp tongue. No nonsense. Heels louder than her voice. Age had mellowed her, but her eyes were still piercing. We hugged briefly, and then she sat back in her chair with a long sigh. "I always wondered what happened to you after Stan passed," she said. "And now here you are. Let me guess. This is about your sons." I blinked. "You knew," she chuckled, dry. "You're not the first client who walks in with that look, Louise. People think elder abuse always looks like bruises. But financial manipulation, that's the new frontier." I laid out everything. The eavesdropped conversation, the withheld mail, the missing keys, Sharon's pregnancy, the push toward assisted living. Sylvia listened without interrupting. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Do not go to war emotionally. Go strategically. Document everything. Don't warn them. Don't confront them. Let them keep walking toward the trap they think they're setting for you." We made a plan. That night, I returned home to the usual chaos. Sharon pacing with her phone on speaker. Dennis ranting about work. They barely registered my presence. I made dinner, ate alone, and went to bed early. But I wasn't tired. I was calculating. I began logging everything. Every conversation. Every time Sharon forgot to give me my prescriptions on time. Every financial question they asked. Every shift in tone when they thought I wasn't listening. I kept a journal. Dated. Time-stamped. Stored it digitally and backed it up to the cloud. Then I started checking the Durham condo's records online. Property taxes were current. HOA fees had been prepaid. But I found something strange. Someone had requested a maintenance inspection without my permission. A call to the management office confirmed it. Ryan Carter had contacted them, pretending to act on my behalf. That was it. They weren't just talking anymore. They were actively moving. The following weekend, Ryan stopped by the house. It was unusual. He rarely visited without Dennis. But that day, he arrived with his usual fake warmth and a bag of takeout. "Thought we could have a little family lunch. Just the two of us," he said. "Red flag." We sat in the dining room while he spooned pad thai onto our plates and rambled about work stress and the rising cost of living. Then he said it. You know, Mom, the condo's a lot to manage. We've been looking into maybe helping you get it sold. Just to take one thing off your plate. I kept my expression blank. Oh, yeah. And assisted living isn't a bad thing. You'd be around people your own age. Activities. Healthcare support. I tilted my head. You think I'm old enough to need that? He laughed nervously. Come on. We're just trying to help. He didn't know I'd already moved every important document out of the house. That I'd filed a power of attorney revocation with Sylvia. That she was preparing a letter to freeze access to any property transfer unless authorized by me directly. In writing, Ryan saw me as vulnerable. I saw him as exposed. By the end of that week, Sharon had booked a tour at a highly rated facility in Cary. Dennis printed out medical bills and placed them in a folder on my nightstand with a note. Let's talk soon. The trap was ready, but it wasn't mine. It was theirs. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the folder of medical bills still unopened beside me. They'd left it there like a warning. Like a list of debts I owed them for having the audacity to survive a stroke and still take up space in a house I bought. I stared at it for a long time before quietly placing it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I didn't need to read it. I already knew what was inside. Carefully curated evidence meant to make me feel like a burden. A subtle psychological invoice for my presence. That was the moment it stopped being about property. It stopped being about money. It became about dignity. You see, when someone you love underestimates you, it doesn't just hurt. It awakens something, a fire. Not anger, exactly, but clarity. The next morning, I called Sylvia. We finalized everything. She had already submitted the paperwork to revoke any previous financial permissions I'd ever casually given Dennis or Ryan. Years ago, I'd signed a few forms when Stan was sick, things that allowed them to help manage bills or check on our joint taxes. Now, all of that was gone, legally severed. Sylvia also prepared a notarized letter clarifying the ownership of the house and condo. She filed alerts with the county to prevent any unauthorized title changes or fraudulent activity. She even flagged my accounts with an elder protection clause, which meant any suspicious attempts to access or transfer funds would be halted immediately and investigated. I wasn't just protecting my assets. I was building a legal fortress. After the paperwork was done, I went home and started the performance of a lifetime. I made myself look tired. Slower than usual. I faked confusion here and there. Forgot the kettle was on. Accidentally placed my keys in the fridge. I watched Dennis and Sharon exchange subtle glances. Little nods. As if confirming their theory that I was declining. Perfect! I let them lead me into conversations about retirement homes and downsizing. I nodded at all the right times. Said things like, maybe it is time I considered what's best for everyone. Sharon patted my hand like she'd just won the lottery. Ryan texted me 2 days later with listings from a realtor I'd never heard of. I told him I'd sleep on it. They believed every word. Meanwhile, I started setting my own trap. I pulled out my old laptop still working, though a little slow, and drafted a letter to the HOA board of the Durham condo. I requested that no third party be allowed into the property without my written permission. I also added a clause about unauthorized key duplication. I signed it, scanned it, emailed it, and sent a certified copy by mail. Next, I scheduled an appointment with a notary and quietly updated my will. I cut both sons out of any property inheritance. Instead, I assigned the house and condo to be placed in a living trust, managed by a third party with strict instructions. Upon my passing, the properties would be sold, and the proceeds donated to Stan's former university for scholarships in engineering and nursing. A full circle. One Stan would have approved of. But the most important piece, a backup plan. I called a close friend from my old church group, Anita Harper. She was a retired teacher who now volunteered at a women's shelter and occasionally worked with legal aid groups. She'd seen this kind of thing before. I explained everything. She didn't interrupt, just listened. When I was done, she took my hand and said, "Whenever you're ready, I'll drive you out of there myself." I gave her a flash drive with digital copies of everything. Legal filings, bank statements, even audio recordings from the kitchen camera I discreetly reactivated the week before. I wasn't just preparing to leave. I was preparing to leave with receipts. A few nights later, the talk finally happened. Sharon sat me down in the living room. Dennis stood behind her like a bodyguard. Ryan was on speakerphone from his apartment in Charlotte. "Mom," Dennis started, "we've been thinking about what's best for you and the family." I nodded. "We found a really beautiful assisted living place," Sharon said, smiling like it was a cruise brochure. "Private rooms, on-site care, social activities. It's not about pushing you out," Ryan added. "It's about your safety," Dennis chimed in again. "And with you downsizing, it would help cover our financial situation. Just temporarily. Of course, once things stabilize, we can revisit everything." I looked from one face to the next. Calm, silent. Sharon reached into her bag and handed me a packet of papers. A brochure from the facility, a list of recommended next steps, and at the bottom, a suggested power of attorney transfer. Just to make things easier. "Take your time," she said gently. I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, I spoke clearly and without hesitation. "I appreciate your concern. Truly, but I think I'll be making some arrangements of my own." That was all I said. They looked confused. Just for a second. But confusion is the first crack in confidence. They didn't know that by the time I stood up from that chair, everything they were plotting had already been neutralized. The accounts were locked, the titles protected, the paper trail exposed. I walked back to my room and shut the door quietly behind me. I didn't slam it. Didn't need to. Power doesn't raise its voice. They say revenge is best served cold. But mine, it was served with precision, quiet dignity, and a touch of Southern charm. No shouting, no confrontations, just calm, deliberate moves. And the first domino fell sooner than I expected. 3 days after the talk, Sharon tried to schedule a tour for the assisted living facility in Cary, the one with the cheerful name and the price tag of a small mortgage. She called me during her lunch break. All sweetness and fake sympathy. "Just thought we'd check it out together," she chirped. "No pressure." "Of course." "Actually," I replied, "I've made other plans for that day." A pause. Then a nervous laugh. "Well, we can reschedule?" "I don't think that'll be necessary." I didn't explain. I didn't need to. By that point, they were already nervous. That same evening, Dennis found a certified letter in the mailbox. It was from Sylvia's firm, addressed to him and Ryan. I wasn't home when he opened it. I'd made sure to be out for a walk. The letter was short, formal, and devastating. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that any attempts to manage, transfer, or interfere with my financial or legal matters would be considered a breach of elder financial protections under North Carolina law. All power of attorney assignments had been revoked. All property was under legal protection via trust ownership. Any further action, without my explicit written consent, would be met with immediate legal response. The kicker. The letter was also CC'd to the county recorder's office, my bank, the HOA board, and the local elder advocacy group. Dennis didn't say a word when I returned home. He just stared at me like he was seeing a ghost, a very alive, Very dangerous ghost. Over the next week, I let them squirm. Ryan called twice, once sounding panicked, once angry. He left a voicemail saying, "We're just trying to help. You're making this into something it's not." I didn't call back. Instead, I had Anita over for tea. She brought cookies. We sat on the porch like two old ladies watching the world go by. But behind her sunglasses, Anita was scanning the house. "Do they know you've got them cornered?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied. "But they're starting to feel it." And they were... Sharon stopped making small talk. Her smile thinned. She began tiptoeing around me, probably afraid I was recording everything, which, to be fair, I'd placed a small audio recorder in the living room clock. Not to catch anything criminal, just to document tone, language, patterns. Sylvia said it was a smart precaution. In court, a pattern of manipulation is often more powerful than a single event. Then came the meltdown. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry when Dennis barged into my room, red-faced and trembling with barely contained fury. "You hired a lawyer behind our backs." I looked up calmly. "I did." "You don't trust us." I tilted my head. "Should I?" He started pacing. "We've bent over backward to take care of you. You've been living here rent-free, eating our food, using our electricity, and now you're treating us like criminals." "No," I said softly. "I'm treating you like adults who made a choice. And now you're facing the consequences of that choice." He stopped in his tracks. "What consequences?" I handed him a second letter, this one notarized and written in plain English. It detailed the exact terms of the living trust, the fact that they were no longer beneficiaries, that they would not inherit the house, the condo, or any funds. His hands shook as he read it. "This is a joke." "Right. No. This is clarity. Something I should have given you years ago." He stormed out, slammed the door. Sharon didn't speak to me for 2 days. But the most satisfying moment came when Ryan showed up in person. He'd driven all the way from Charlotte unannounced, still clinging to the fantasy that charm would fix this. He hugged me in the driveway like nothing had happened. Over lunch, he tried the soft approach. "Mom, I know things got tense," he said, pushing his salad around with a fork. "But I think we're all just misunderstanding each other." "Is that so?" I replied, sipping my iced tea. He nodded. "Maybe we just need a clean start. You know, a new financial advisor. Someone neutral." That's when I reached under the table and slid a small USB drive toward him. "What's this?" "A backup of everything you've tried to do to me over the last 3 months," I said, cool as glass. "Emails, property requests, unauthorized inspection logs, recordings." His face went pale. "I haven't sent it anywhere yet," I added. "But I do have an automatic cloud sync set up. So if anything happens to me, if I trip down the stairs or get signed into a facility I didn't choose, that drive sends a full report to law enforcement. And Sylvia?" Ryan didn't even finish his lunch. He walked out, muttering something about lawyers ruining families. Later that night, I sat in the garden Stan had built years ago. The sun was setting. The air was soft. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. It wasn't just about keeping my home. It wasn't just about stopping them. It was about reclaiming my name, my power, my peace. I'd done it with calm, with intelligence, with grace. And the best part, they had no idea what else I had planned. In the weeks that followed, the house grew quieter. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet you hear after a storm, when branches are still hanging by threads and nothing's quite settled. Sharon barely looked at me. Dennis didn't speak unless it was necessary. And Ryan, well, Ryan disappeared. I knew they were regrouping. trying to figure out their next move. But I had already made mine. And every path they tried to take led to a wall I had already built. Sharon was the first to crack. It happened one morning while I was making tea. She walked into the kitchen, saw me standing there, and paused. Her eyes were heavy, like she hadn't slept. "You really locked everything down, didn't you?" she asked. I didn't answer. "You could have just told us. You didn't have to make it so cold." I looked at her. Really looked. "Sharon, you planned to move me out of my home so you could have more closet space for your baby," I said quietly. "You were going to sell my condo without my permission. You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to erase me." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Just silence. Then she left the room, her footsteps softer than usual. Dennis didn't break so easily. Instead, he tried to reclaim the moral high ground. One night, he stood in the hallway outside my door and said, "I hope you're happy." I didn't look up from my book. "I'm not, but I'm safe. That matters more. You've divided this family." "No," I said, closing the book gently. "You did that the moment you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as your retirement plan." He didn't have a response for that. Just stood there in the doorway for a second, then walked away. And that was the last real conversation we had. Ryan sent a few half-hearted apology texts, mostly variations of "I was just going along with what Dennis said, and I didn't mean to upset you." But I ignored them. He wasn't sorry. He was just afraid. I didn't need apologies. I needed boundaries. And for once in my life, I had them. I took control of my environment. 2. I began spending more time at my Durham condo. I had the locks changed, repainted the kitchen, even replaced the worn carpet in the guest room. It was mine again. Free from their presence, from their plotting, Anita helped me move a few essentials back in my tea set. Stan's framed diploma, and the little photo of us on our honeymoon in Asheville. We'd looked so young, so hopeful. I stayed there 2 nights a week. The house in Raleigh no longer felt like home. It felt like a lesson I had finally learned. Then came the knock on the door. It was a Wednesday afternoon, sunlight filtering through the blinds. I opened it to find Sylvia standing there, crisp as ever in a tailored blazer and soft gray slacks. "You're ready," she said, stepping inside. I nodded. "I am." We sat at the kitchen table, and she placed a thick folder between us. "These are the final trust documents. The properties are secure. The living will is updated. Your accounts are locked under legal protection. And if anything happens to you, everything is executed without needing your children's approval." I breathed in slowly. That feeling, that deep, rooted sense of control settled into my chest, like warmth. "There's just one last thing," she added. "Are you sure you want to keep them in the loop at all?" I thought about it. About birthdays and Christmases. About Dennis's face when he graduated college. About Ryan falling off his bike when he was 7 and crying into my arms. About all the memories that now felt like they belonged to someone else. "No," I said at last. "If they want a relationship, they can earn it back. On my terms." Sylvia smiled. "Good. Then it's done." The next day, I left a letter for Dennis and Sharon on the kitchen table. Not angry, not vindictive, just final. It said, "I appreciate the roof and the meals, but I will no longer be staying here. The condo in Durham suits me better. Please don't contact me about finances again. I hope, in time, we can find something that resembles a relationship, but that depends entirely on your choices from here on out." That was it. No threats, no guilt, just boundaries. And then I left. There's something liberating about closing a chapter, when you know you wrote every word of the ending. I wasn't pushed out. I walked out on my terms. I didn't just defend myself. I reclaimed my identity. Because the truth is, they never really saw me. Not the real me. They saw a role. Mother. Caregiver. Widow. Eventually. Burden. But I'm more than that. I'm Louise Carter, widow of Stan Carter, registered nurse of 38 years, owner of 2 properties, keeper of my own damn future, and now, finally free. People assume that betrayal in a family always comes loud. A shouting match, a slammed door, a courtroom. But in real life, it's much quieter. It comes dressed as concern. It sounds like, we're just trying to help. And if you're not paying attention, it feels almost like love. Until it doesn't. Looking back, I think the worst part wasn't the schemes or the lies. It was realizing that my own sons saw me as a problem to manage, not a person to respect. That realization cut deeper than any lawyer's letter ever could. But here's the thing no one talks about. Sometimes, setting boundaries is the only way to salvage whatever's left of a relationship. And sometimes, it's the only way to walk away with your dignity intact. I didn't choose revenge out of bitterness. I chose it because respect isn't given freely. It's demanded through action. I'd spent decades being the rock for everyone else. The caregiver, the comforter, the one who fixed things, smoothed things over, absorbed the hurt so others didn't have to. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that I was allowed to fight for myself. This wasn't just about property, or money, or inheritance. It was about refusing to be erased. It's been 4 months since I left the Raleigh house. Life in my Durham condo is peaceful. I wake up when I want. I make my tea, open the window, and sit with a book, or the birds. No whispering in the next room. No guilt hanging over breakfast. Just quiet, the kind I choose. Dennis sent a card last month. Just a generic one with a typed message. Hope you're well. Sharon had the baby. His name's Matthew. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a status update. I put the card in a drawer and haven't responded. Not yet. Ryan hasn't reached out at all. And you know what? That's okay. Because I've stopped measuring my worth by how much space I take up in someone else's life. I've stopped shrinking myself to fit into roles that no longer serve me. I've also started volunteering again, this time with a local elder advocacy group. Once a week. I speak at a support circle for older adults who faced financial manipulation from their own families. I tell them my story, not because I want pity, but because I want them to understand. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to protect what's yours. To expect respect. To walk away when love is used as leverage. I met a woman there, Gloria, whose daughter tried to refinance her house behind her back. Another man, Sam, whose grandson wiped out his savings. They all thought they were alone, just like I did. But we're not alone, and we're not powerless. We're just told we are until we prove otherwise. As for me, I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. I'm not naive. I know time isn't unlimited, but what I do with it is still mine to decide. Maybe I'll travel a bit. Maybe I'll finally take that pottery class Stan always joked I'd hate. Maybe I'll just sit on this balcony, drink my tea, and let the breeze carry away what's left of the bitterness. I don't know what Dennis or Ryan will do with their lives. I don't know if they'll ever look in the mirror and really see what they became. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I did my part. I raised them. I gave them everything I could, sometimes too much. And when they turned on me, I didn't break. I rose. That's the real story. Not of a victim, but of a woman who remembered who she was. Just in time. If you've ever felt trapped by the people who were supposed to protect you. If you've ever been made to feel like you're too old, too much, or in the way, know this: you still have a voice. You still have power, and it's never too late to use it. Please share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Comment below if you've ever gone through something similar. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because this channel is where truth lives, and we honor voices that refuse to be silenced. Thank you for listening.